Hello, everybody. This is a bit of an impromptu live. I've been working on some documents today, and I thought it was time to speak a little bit more about some of my theories about the phone data that are receiving a lot of pushback right now. So I figured that the explanations that I've used so far haven't been enough. And so instead, it would be a good idea to go step by step through my thought process. So I'm going to go through a document that I've made that is in the description. So you're welcome to read along. I'll pop it on the screen in a minute. You're welcome to chat along as we talk about this. I may only glance at the chat while I'm going through it, but I'll certainly check the chat at the end if there are any questions. So this is a bold claim, but it is a claim that I stand by staunchly, and that is I don't believe that headphones were plugged and unplugged into and out of Libby's phone over the course of the evening of February the 13th, 2017. Now, this is a bold claim. As I said, it goes against the defense expert testimony, and that's going to be unlike me because essentially anyone who follows my channel knows that I am staunchly an advocate for Rick Allen, and I do truly believe he is factually innocent and wrongfully convicted for the murders of Abby and Libby. And as such, it pains me to go against the defense's argument. However, as I've explained numerous times, I don't believe this was the argument that would win the defense the case. And obviously it didn't. I think there are far better arguments or evidence that can be exculpatory for Rick and could help really at least create reasonable doubt, even if it doesn't completely convince people of his innocence. So it's not a popular opinion. We talked about confirmation bias yesterday, and I know that many people will push back against this because it's outside of what they would like to believe. But I honestly am saying that understanding this phone data is not going to cause an issue for Rick Allen's defense. It just helps to really clear up and kind of get a better view of what was actually going on. Now, anyone who's been following my channel consistently over the last little while will know that there was a bit of a bombshell dropped a couple of days ago. We talked, actually, was that a couple of days ago? It was yesterday. We talked about something that I feel exists in that knowledge seed data that hadn't been discussed, and that is an incoming video chat from Snapchat that comes in at 1:51 while the girls are actually walking on the trails. It's a phone call that has never been discussed by anyone, and I think the timing is incredibly important. I think it's, to me, speaks to the girls potentially speaking to someone who they plan to meet, potentially the person that Betsy Blair saw on the Monon High Bridge. And the reason that it's so important is, firstly, it gives us more data and information about what was going on in those last few hours. But also, I think it is, again, something that can support Rick's defense, because most of us, I think, would agree, even the people who lean towards Rick being guilty, most of us would agree that it's unlikely that the girls were receiving a video call from Rick Allen, a middle-aged man, in the minutes as they approached the Monon High Bridge. First of all, the state have us believe that Rick Allen's phone was not around the scene of the crime. Now, I misspoke yesterday. It wasn't a misspeak as in I don't believe this, but I think it could be wrongly interpreted. And I said Rick's phone wasn't on the trails that day. And what I meant was Rick's phone wasn't on the trails in the crime scene vicinity during the main period that the law enforcement looked at, but we don't know if it was on the trails that day. I am very strongly of the belief that it was on the trails that day, but he left before the abduction and therefore is not at all implicated in this case. Anyway, without further ado, we're going to look at what we're talking about today, though. I'm going to do a series over the next probably week to discuss the various things that I found from the Knowledge C data. Unfortunately, most of them have not been well received by the other people in the Free Rick Allen community, and that's why I feel like it's important that I go step by step through why I've come to these conclusions, to hopefully help people to see that it's not just an attempt to be a contrarian, and I'm not basing it on just random ideas. Okay, so let's launch in. So the headphones that never were, Libby's phone speaks. I'm just checking the chat because we've just had someone coming in. Hello, Nellie. You said, I was just reading info or attempting to find some about this exactly when your live started. Spooky. Oh, excellent. Well, there you go. I'm going to talk you through this step by step. I've been looking into this now for quite a few weeks, getting my head around this. And every single time that I look into the Knowledge C data, I see something else that I need to understand. And sometimes I recognize that things that I might have initially thought are not quite on track, and I kind of evolve my opinion. But I've been pretty firm on this from very early on. I did not believe that the audio output route change had anything to do with headphones. The main reason was when I looked through the Knowledge C data set, I saw that there were other logs like this stamped through those couple of days, and they were linked to things that used the audio system of the phone, things like Siri, things like a call or phone call, and things like a video. So I understood from that audio output route change is not just about headphones. It's about any audio being processed, received, or processed through the phone. Hey, Paradox, thanks for joining us as well. It's nice to see a few people in here. I know it's not an ideal time for a live for the people in the Northern Hemisphere, but really appreciate you guys joining. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm just going to do the disclaimer before we get into everything, because I always do this. First of all, what are we here for? We're here for justice for these two beautiful girls, Abby and Libby. As you know, I'm also here for justice for Richard Allen, who I believe is not guilty of this crime and wrongfully convicted. The disclaimer that I have on every single one of my videos is that this is a presentation that is purely for educational and discussion purposes. The views expressed are my personal opinions and interpretations of publicly available information, and the research that I do. I use AI to support me in understanding things that I have not studied in depth, and I use it in a process where I basically use it as a research assistant and keep kind of chatting and layering my questions out until I really dig deep. Although I am a registered psychologist, so I have copious training in research methods and statistics, I'm not acting in a clinical, forensic, or expert capacity here. I'm not presenting anything that constitutes psychological assessment, diagnosis, treatment, or expert testimony. Not a lawyer, not a legal professional, not a digital forensic expert, although I do like to make jokes about my little team of pets who are. So check out the picture in the community page, check out the little video of Kai telling me about the Snapchat video. That's just a little bit of fun stuff that's in the background. But yeah, nothing here should be taken as legal advice, expert opinion, or a definitive statement of fact. I'm not really going to talk about anyone who I think is guilty, but if I ever did, not today anyway. But when I do, they are all presumed innocent. until proven guilty in the court of law. Okay, so let's pull up this document. It is in the description box, so please feel free to read along. You can look at it whenever you like. I'm going to make a whole series of documents to support other people in looking at this knowledge seed data. So just firstly, actually, I was going to see if I could actually share the one that I've shared previously. So this one was shared in the video from yesterday. So if you want to have a look at what all the different things in the knowledge C data set are, this is some of the things that I've kind of come up with through my own exploration. If you've got any other questions, if there's anything on here that's inaccurate, let me know. It's a live document, so I'll keep updating it. But today we are going to look at this one instead. So this is the document that I have created for people who want to better understand the audio output route logs in the knowledge seed data. Now, I've said it's an explainer. Of course, it's not explaining everything. As I said, I'm not a digital forensics expert. Hi, C3. Thanks for joining again. Lovely to see you. Paradox, you are absolutely dead on the money. I'm going to pop your comment up there. Absolutely. It doesn't record raw hardware insertions. It records session level route changes inside an active audio session. Thank you so much. That's actually, spoiler alert, that's coming up in the presentation. You're 100% correct there, which again is why this misconception about headphones being plugged in and out, I believe is not really 100% accurate. So good job, Paradox. I sound like a teacher saying good job. I don't mean to say it like that, but yeah, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for to have the verdict that we had hoped for, or I had hoped for anyway. Okay, so here we go. Now, is this all showing on the screen properly? Yes, it is. Okay. How do I get rid of that bit? Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. All right, so usually I use Canva, so I'm using a Google Doc today, but it's not going to look as pretty as Canva. Okay, so the headphones at 5:45 claim why I believe it's almost certainly wrong. Now, people don't like it when I say that a digital forensic expert is wrong, and I understand that. I am not a digital forensic expert, so I can see how that seems incredibly bold, but I have done a lot of research in this, and not simply just a few Google searches and not simply just asking ChatGPT. Because in fact, if you ask ChatGPT this, it will initially back up that it could be headphones. So it's not just about asking the question, it's about like really digging under the layers of that. And that's what I've been doing over weeks. So again, I've got another little bit of a disclaimer here that's more to do with specifically kind of contradicting, I suppose, forensic examiners' work. And I just really want people to know that this is just my own independent interpretation based on available information and technical documentation related to Apple iOS logging behavior. I'm not at all trying to suggest that other experts are haven't done the right thing, but I am able to sort of, I guess, make some speculation around where I feel maybe things weren't applied in the most helpful way, I suppose. So yeah, but it's not that I'm saying I'm an expert witness here, clearly. I know that probably sounds a bit contradictory, but, I just think that we should all be open to constructive criticism. So anyway, as an expert in my field, if I'm saying something that people could dispute based on technical and other information, then I'd probably want to hear that, even though it might hurt my ego a little bit. Let's be honest. Okay, so let's get into it, because I'm just talking and talking and not actually getting to the point, which is classic of me. So I'm not really watching the chat, guys, but please don't. Oh, my audio cut out. Can you hear me now? Am I on track? Did I miss out? Like, did I cut out anything important? Let me know. It might have cut out some of my ramblings and my disclaimers. So if it did cut anything out, let me know, and I'm happy to go back over it. But thank you for letting me know, Paradox. Okay, so I'm trying to make this small enough that I can see the chat at the same time, and that's tricky. Okay, so what Apple actually logs. So just Oh, thanks, Paradox. I'm good now. So when an iPhone changes where it's sending or receiving sound, say switching from the built-in speaker to headphones or from Bluetooth to the receiver, iOS records an audio route change. Digital forensic tools like Apollo, Magnet, Axiom, and Belkasoft interpret this stream as audio output route. Records any sound path being used, internal, earpiece, Bluetooth, etc. So, as I said, it's not a headphone detector. And as Paradox was saying in the chat, it's a general log of output path transitions. Now, so what that means is it is logging where the sound is going to. It's not logging whether something's plugged in or not. So let's say I'm listening to music, and I'm listening to it just on the phone speaker, then that would be the output. If I then plug in headphones whilst listening to music, or I switch on music with headphones plugged in, it will then direct the audio to headphones. So just simply plugging in headphones into a phone that is in a static state, which I truly believe Libby's phone is, from what we can see in the data logging, would not do very much. What it would potentially do, I suppose this was the theory, was, was it plugged in so that the phone didn't ring? Well, if the phone did ring, essentially it would, I believe, I need to double check this, but I would believe it would show audio output route logs every time a new call was received, because that would be new audio or a new sound coming in. So it would not just continuously just be there accepting anything audio and not mentioning it in the log, if that makes sense. Sorry, not super technical explanation, but let's keep going. So what does this mean for 5:45 p.m.? Well, there's no screen on, unlock, or app in focus events directly related to this. That means that the system itself, not a user, changed or closed the audio route. So initially, and I'm going to bring up the data set again here. If it loads, my computer's having a little crash meltdown here. Here we go. Okay. You guys are getting the trial run of doing this. I'm going to record this as a video as well. That's for people who don't want to hear the rambling and have the sort of interaction in the chat. So yeah, you guys are my test run for this. You'll have to let me know if I'm explaining it in a helpful way. I've got to go all the way down here to back over here. Okay, so what you can see here is the audio output route start time. The screen is already on, but that's not linked directly to when this starts. So the screen was already on. And I'm going to discuss this when I talk more about the cold shock theory, which has been getting a lot of pushback, and the phone, in my opinion, actually powering down or what's the word? Just completely, powering off at 5:45. I'll explain more what these screen on and offs are, but you can see that's not paired directly with this audio output route start time. Yes, we've got this incoming call. So again, I think, people start to believe, is that linked to it? Yes, but the call is not actually answered. So again, could it be the ring of the call? Yes, potentially it could be, but we're not seeing that happen with these other calls over here. right? So if that was something that we see when an incoming call comes in, then we would expect that every single time. But we don't see any audio output route for the other calls. I guess I'm just even thinking aloud as I'm saying this. I'm imagining people will say, yes, but that's because that was just going to the usual audio or whatever. And so now you've plugged in the headphones and that's why it's the route change. I suppose that's possible. But again, I've got more evidence to come about why I don't think that this is headphones beyond the fact that it's a little bit out of place, right? The other one that people often mention with this audio output is back up here after the bridge guy video. So let's go back up. Glad I'm doing a trial run right now because I'm thinking of more things that I want to look up when I finish this for a more formal video later. So let's go back up here, and we've got here we have audio output route start time, and people are like, so did she plug in headphones when she was going down the hill? Which I think most of us would say again is highly unlikely. That's just 2 seconds after the bridge guy video stops recording. And so that to me is related to the bridge guy video. And again, this links in with the video recording from the lock screen. So this is something I'm going to explain in more detail in that video, which again is another area that gets pushed back. But essentially this is the processing of the audio from that video after the video has stopped. So this clearly here is nothing to do with a headphone event. There's nothing here to indicate that a call's being received or there's any sound coming out of the phone. There's no playback or anything. Now, there are other audio output entries along the way as well. So we can see, though, that they're always linked to another event. So let's just go to another one. That's the end time there. That's at 2:20. So again, we can't see any event around it. So no real reason there. Why would she unplug the headphones? Let's see. I'm trying to get to the earlier part of the data set to show you some more examples. I'm going to have to go this way. Okay, here we go. We've got another one here. That's at 1:39. So that corresponds with the call to Derek German. And again, there's no real indicator here that would be that there'd be headphone insertion there either. But there's another one up here that I wanted to show you too, because I think, again, it's quite useful to see the different entries of this. Apologies, guys. I'm always trying to search through this data set. So we've got it here happening during an outgoing call as well. And we've got it various times here to do with the phone app and the house party app probably. And there's one earlier that's to do with Siri as well. So I was going to try and show you that one. No, I can't seem to get to it for some reason now. But yeah, basically, if you go through this data set, you'll see that every single audio output route, start and end time, there we go, that's the Siri one, is related to another event that's happening there. And it logs a start and a stop time. So it's quite consistent. Whereas this one, right down the bottom, is only consistent with a call that isn't answered. And yet there aren't other audio outputs for other calls that aren't answered. Anyway, let's move on from that point. I think that that's definitely something I'd like to put some more information in around, potentially just explaining why I don't think that that's trying to stop the ringtone. But we'll get to that in future lives, I suppose, because I probably don't have an opportunity to look at that right now as we're talking about it. But this is what I believe it actually is. I believe initially I used to think that it was to do with a voicemail being processed that comes in around that time, but actually, this is the conclusion that I've come to now, that this is routine during a shutdown. So, according to the research that I've done, when iOS senses a battery collapse or cold shock voltage drop, it begins a graceful emergency power down sequence. So, at this point, the phone is really struggling. It's been on 4% for the last, well, it was on 4% 3 hours earlier. It's in, very cold conditions out in the woods, and basically the phone is conking out. It's basically saying I'm done. So during this process, background daemons like Springboard, Core Audio, and Powered issue final close calls to safely terminate system sounds, alerts, or audio channels that are always running in the background. So even if no app was open, these frameworks still exist and must be closed properly. So actually, I'm going to go back and check this in a minute after we've got through all of this, but I believe all of the other audio outputs have some link to an app being open. I'll double check that. That's just a theory. Anyway, so the 5:45 p.m. entry potentially reflects the audio subsystem closing during that shutdown, not a person inserting headphones or starting music, because there are no other apps in the foreground. The phone wasn't playing music or plugging in headphones. It was most likely finishing or closing a background audio process, like the system sound or a daemon's audio session, right as it lost power. So plugging in headphones will not give you an audio output route event on its own. As we said before, it will only give you that if there is actually some sort of audio output occurring at that time when the headphones go in, because then the route changes from maybe the speaker to the headphones or Bluetooth to the speaker. So it has to actually show a change in the audio output, not a static just plugging in of headphones. So yeah, Knowledge C doesn't record raw hardware insertions. It records session level route changes inside an active audio session. Hey Dee Dee, nice to see you. I missed a lot of your live earlier because I was out and about, so I couldn't listen in properly. But nice to see you. This is, I guess what I'm talking about today. You can see I'm not super excited about it. It's kind of meh, like it's kind of just technical stuff that sort of I was excited about, like first learning about it, but it doesn't really feel super exciting. But I think it's still important. So yeah, it only fires when a process is producing or about to produce sound, or during an active session when it switches route. So if the phone's idle, plugging in earpods or in this case, I don't know why it's calling it earpods. That was a mistake. It should be headphones. Let's change that as we're talking. Would be a hardware click, but no Knowledge C entry because no audio session was open. So apparently there are plenty of people who've tested this out as well. So I don't mean apparently. I've had a look at them. I can't read all of this technical data. There's someone I reached out to who had written some really good stuff about Knowledge C that I wanted to talk to about this. So let's hope, fingers crossed, I hear back from that person, because it'd be great to actually have a real expert on this talk to us about this, or at least give us some input. But yeah, they've basically done these real tests on iPhone 10 to 17. Sorry, iOS 10 to 17 phones, and basically shown that if you plug in earpods or headphones, it doesn't show any log. If you're playing music and you unplug headphones, you will log a route change. If you're recording a video, it logs a route change because mic or speaker is engaged. If the phone is asleep and you plug in headphones, you don't get any log. Okay, so this means the 545 record probably can't be a simple headphone insertion. It had to occur during active or terminating audio process, such as system shutdown. So I think probably part of the reason I'm feeling a little bit a bit bland now as I'm wondering. I definitely have that question. If we go back to the data. Oh, I just realized I wasn't showing you guys what I was reading on the document. But anyway, never mind. You've got the document to look at. I'm really scattered today. Like I said, good. This is a test run. I'm going to look again on here. So bear with me, guys. I know there's a few of you in here, so I really appreciate you guys being my test run for this. And I'll do a better job of this next time without so many of these questions. Okay, so you can see here we've got the audio route start time coinciding with the house party app, then with the phone app in that case. Let's go to the next ones. Actually, I'm going to just put this on full screen because it's annoying otherwise. Okay, so let's go down to the next one. So those ones are the house party apps using it, and then the phone app is using it. And then we've got here phone app. So this is when they call Derek German. We see the phone app is in the foreground when it starts. So it ends. So here, so the bridge guide video is a tricky one, which we'll talk about more when we talk about the whole aspect of the fact that it's recorded in a lock screen. So let's leave the bridge guide video one for the moment, because we will get back to it in another video. But let's just go back to earlier ones. I feel like all of them show an app in the foreground when they occur, though. These are the later ones. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. So, okay, we've got one here, which is audio output route start time, phone unlocked. Is that one cut off? Let's see. Oh, no, whoops. Oh, my goodness, guys, I'm really struggling. Here we go. So here we got phone app in the foreground, audio output route end time after that. This is definitely a little bit confusing. Siri activated, Siri deactivated, audio output route start time. So we know Siri is actually involved with this because Siri's what's the reason? I remember reading Siri was related to this. Let's have a think about this. Siri, because Siri is talking to you. So yes, it'd be using the speaker. That's right. But it does seem like audio output is simply when you're hearing something from the phone, or it's processing something, some sort of sound within the phone. So most of them are linked to actual conversations, phone calls, Siri talking. So we don't see it routinely occurring for calls coming in, that sound. So the ringtone of the phone doesn't seem to map that. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Sorry, guys. I think I'm like putting you to sleep in the chat. This is a bit boring, to be honest. Does that make sense? I guess my question here that I'm thinking aloud as I'm talking to you guys is, now let's look at this. So this is the whole point where I really do kind of, in the way, like to show the process, because you can see I'm not just blindly going, nope, this is what it is, and I'm sticking to it. I might be wrong. So let's actually look at this. And I sound so incredulous when I say that. No, I have been wrong many times. Okay, great. Paradox. It makes sense to you. Okay, what I'm going to ask, so I am going to my buddy ChatGPT to ask this, and then we can chat about it, is would a phone call coming into a phone or an iPhone show an audio route change if you plug in headphones but don't answer the call? Okay, that's what I've just typed in. Okay, so apparently it depends on the exact sequence of events. Let's see, and the iOS version. Okay, so it says, okay, so when a call arrives, the phone's audio subsystem prepares potential output routes: internal earpiece, speaker, or connected headset. If you plug in headphones during the ring, the system detects and logs an audio route change, even if you never answer the call. So, okay, so yes, iOS will usually record an audio output change event when the call is incoming, and you plug in or connect a new audio device. Okay, guys, so there we go. It potentially, the 545 one could be in relation to that. Let's read what it says. So why this happens, even before you accept the call, the core audio system initializes the input-output path for ringtones and for possible voice session. So when you insert headphones, the ringtone output switches from the internal speaker to the headset, which is an audio route change event. Okay. Now, important for forensics. So if you see a single audio output route change around the same second as a missed call, that could just indicate a headset was plugged or unplugged. Okay. It's still not saying it's not proof of user interaction because it could be Bluetooth connected or disconnected. The system toggled output modes as part of the ringing process. Okay, so let's ask, what about in iOS 10.2.1? And let's see what it says. It's thinking. I'm thinking too. I'm like, okay, if that's the case, then what does this mean? Let's see. It's a niche query, but still relevant, it's saying in the background. Okay, yeah, so it would. Okay, so it would. Okay, well, that's good to know. So I guess what we're saying here then, change of tack here, guys, is that potentially that is what's going on there. Now, I am surprised because I personally don't think it adds up, but there is more anyway. It's not the only part of my argument for why I don't think it is headphones plugged in, but let's go back down to it and have another look. I've got Kai in the background. We need his digital expertise. You can hear now I've got a bit more excited. I'm like, okay, there's more to dig in here. This isn't just an open and shut case. So even though it might contradict my idea, the mystery of this is still more interesting. So let's go back up here to 545 and look at this. So what I had initially thought was that this might be to do with the transcription or the transcript of voicemail 7, because there's an audio file created. So that's what I thought this was potentially related to, not the call. But it's hard to know. So what we're going to do, so this is literally my process. So I'm showing you guys how I use AI to help me with this. What I do is I'll copy these cells specifically and I'll put them into ChatGPT and we'll see what it says. Now, anyone watching who's sort of anti-AI and thinks it's just sort of basically another form of Google, I mean, it is, but it basically adds so much more information than when you're going on Google and you're having to kind of click through and read it. But also, it's not as simple as just copying and pasting. Like you also want to keep asking and digging like we're doing now. Okay. So I'm basically putting that in to ChatGPT saying, what about this one here? And let's see what it says. Okay. I love how ChatGPT talks. It's an insightful catch. So the specific sequence tells us a lot about what was happening. So this is what it's suggesting. I'm just going to quickly read it and then. Okay, so it says the audio route event occurred before the call began, meaning the phone had just changed its output context, possibly to prepare for the ringtone, or because a route speaker headset was initialized as the call hit. There's no sign the call was answered or that the user interacted with the device. The repeated disconnected connected entries immediately after the screen off suggest the modem stack was failing or dropping out, consistent with a power or thermal shutdown rather than a manual hang up. So it says at 5:45 p.m., the phone started ringing, tried to manage its audio and network connections, never completed the call, then quickly powered down its subsystems. That's exactly what you'd expect if the phone's battery had just hit the cold shock threshold. The system fires off last-ditch disconnects as voltage collapses. Look, I'm going to admit here, though, again, still, whilst that now goes back to confirming what my initial hypothesis was, this is my ChatGPT, and so it knows my theories. And so it's going to jump to conclusions more than if I wasn't logged in to ChatGPT. The problem with not being logged into ChatGPT and using AI means that you're kind of starting really fresh and you've got to give it and input all of this other information. But nonetheless, happy to do that as a bit of an experiment too. You guys are coming on a ride with me. Diana, ChatGPT is the love of your life. Yes. Actually, you're right. That's what I should do, Diana. Ask him, are you being biased? I have to ask this because you know my theory. Okay, here you go, guys. I'm literally typing this in. Are you being biased? And it says, no, I'm weighing my interpretation to fit your I'm not weighing my interpretation to fit your theory. What I'm doing is explaining what each system level log entry typically means. Each of those entries, let's see, they appear in any missed call sequence whether the phone dies afterwards or stays on. They don't imply human action unless paired with unlock, touch, or screen on events. Okay, but I'm still thinking if that happens in any action, why does it only happen with that call? So let's ask that. Does it only happen with that one missed call? I hope this is okay as I'm just kind of typing out and talking. So why it only happens once? If all the other missed calls use the same audio route as the last one, for example, still on the internal speaker, the system has no reason to write another one. That particular call coincided with a route reinitialization event. The log line appears just before it, meaning the device had to reevaluate its output channel at that moment. That can happen if the modem or audio subsystem had just been woken from a deep or low power state. The device was shifting between audio contexts from media idle to ringing or a transient connection. Headphones, BT accessory was detected or dropped. Missed calls later or earlier might have had no such trigger. So even though those calls also rang, iOS didn't need to rebuild the audio session. It's also possible that this was the phone's final route initialization before shutdown in voltage collapse or thermal shock occurred. Oh, it just feels like it's like not giving this definitive response. This is annoying because I'm like, I kind of just want to know exactly. So if we go back here to the data set, I'm saying go back here. You guys aren't going from window to window with me anyway. I mean, it says that it's occurring before the call, but it's only 1 second. So, I mean, that timing, yes, you could say, well, how did they know that call was coming in? I definitely go with that. That's true. You wouldn't know ahead of time that another call's coming in. But I've also learnt with this log that a second here or there doesn't necessarily mean anything. So, yeah. That is definitely the last incoming call, though, isn't it? Yeah, it is. It is the last incoming call. So, I mean, I believe this here, all of this stuff going on around here is where everything disconnects and the phone does power off. The rest here are artifacts until 4:33, and we'll talk about all of that. I think at 4:33 a.m. now I'm believing it's not just ghost events, but it's a flicker of voltage that lights it back up, but it doesn't fully turn back on and then it dies again. But that explains the events at 4:33, and we'll talk more about that in a subsequent video. But anyway, look, I'm not going to get stuck on this point. I'm going to research it and come back to you guys with more ideas, but let's not get stuck on it because I've got more stuff to talk about and get through, and I want to not make this ridiculously long. Okay, so let's go back to this. So we've talked about all of this. So yeah, for Libby's phone specifically, there doesn't seem to be an app active or in focus. The phone had already shown rapid voltage decline, which again is the cold shock theory, which we'll talk more about. The 5:45 p.m. entry was immediately followed by no further logging. And then the phone reappears briefly around 4:33 a.m., which is consistent with a cold, stalled power cycling device, not a phone playing music through headphones. Now, okay, we're not suggesting, I mean, that sounds a bit absurd. I probably should change that because that sounds like we're kind of mocking that idea, but that's not what people are suggesting. I think they're suggesting the headphones were maybe there to block any noise coming from the phone rather than playing music. So note to self to correct that. And the 1032 entry, because there's not just the 545 one, in my opinion with this hypothesis, is just the phone catching up once it flickers back on briefly. Oh, actually not once it flickers back on briefly, whenever it flickers back on, whether at that time because the voltage is unstable in the battery, or whether it's an artifact that's sort of synced in later. But basically it's not new activity. It's a digital equivalent of a computer saying, oh, I crashed earlier, let me close those files now. Okay, but now let's get to the next thing, the next point. So that's the first point of contention, that it doesn't tend to look as though it maps onto any specific event other than that call that occurs a second later. But even if that is true, that it potentially is in relation to that call, this was the other issue, and this is more of a technical issue. So why 1 equals headphones is not universally true. So the number stored beside the audio output route is not fixed across iOS versions. Apple never publish a chart telling you this. There are, however, values that changed according to some experts who have blogs and things online, one of which I've reached out to, so we'll see if we can hear back. But they actually restructured Core Duet and Knowledge C in iOS 11, which was late in 2017. So each forensic tool applies its own mapping table, which can differ and which assumes the examiner told it the correct iOS version. So the best practice is to treat this number as a clue but not a conclusion, and always cross-check it with timestamps, nearby activity, and other evidence. And what Eldridge claimed, however, was that 1 means headphones. That integer 1, that number 1 means headphones. And so she concluded that at 5:45 p.m. a headphone jack was inserted. But she also said it wasn't just a 1. She saw words wired headphones in the blob. Now, I thought the blob was just like some slang term. I'm going to laugh at myself there because I know that's silly. But blob has a meaning in digital forensics, so we'll talk about that in a minute. She also admitted that she's missing that log. She didn't have any data to say exactly when the phone shut off, and after 4:35 a.m. there was nothing logged. So that's what you'd expected if the device had powered off, not if it was streaming audio through headphones for hours. Again, I think, ChatGPT's gone a bit awry with helping me create this document and maybe leaned a little bit too far into absurdity. But here's the blob interpretation. Who knew I would be making a video about a blob interpretation? So where the blob interpretation went wrong? Well, she uses magnet axiom to decode the Knowledge C database. And in that, it really requires the examiner to correctly identify the iOS version because, as I said, Apple changed their internal mapping system. So 1 might mean one thing in iOS 10 and another thing in iOS 11. And it definitely seems from the research that I've done that there was a change in the labeling or the schema that they used between those. Now, the problem is then that you're using 2024 tools to examine 2017 data. And if you haven't let the system know that, then it's going to say, well, 1 in 2024 does mean headphones. It absolutely does. If you look it up, you can see it. It says 1 is headphones. But in 2017, 1 actually most likely meant speaker. Okay, which rings true here because we hear it happening when there's Siri. We see it happening when there's a phone call with Derek German. We see it happening when they're on House Party, etc. So it seems like when we see this audio output route change, and I don't know if those numbers were also 1. I should double check that. But regardless, I guess those ones there were the speaker of the phone rather than headphones. So if she didn't actually put in that it was an older version, then that would be problematic. And when you read her testimony through, it doesn't sound as though that's a consideration that was made. Now, that could just be an omission. However, when you read what Cecil says, he talks about this still being researched. And one of the charts that I found, which I should have popped up on the screen now, and I haven't, but if you go on Twitter, you'll see it, and I'll pop it in the community page, says that this was still being researched. And so he says that, and she says, no, it's been confirmed. So to me, she is relying upon this newer iOS 11 onwards research that says one is headphones, if that makes sense. So, yeah, basically, Apple's own developer documentation makes this clear, that the route change events are not headphone insertions, and basically that the values or the markers can change over time. And in this case, it seems strongly supported, I suppose, by the research that I've done, that it did change between iOS 10 or 10.2.1 and 11. And in the old system, it definitely seems like one meant speaker, not headphones. So this is a reference here. You can actually download this document and you can have a look at some of this stuff. So this is just that Cecil and Bunner didn't have a clue. They didn't know what it was. And yeah, I'll just get to the TLDR. Audio output route does not mean explicitly headphones. It logs any change in an audio path during an active session. So plugging in headphones while idle won't create it. So now we've just got to figure out whether that theory of it being plugged in because of the phone ringing makes sense. However, I just don't see how it would, right? Because again, just going back to this is more just sort of thinking in context as opposed to any specific research. But when we go back to this sheet here, then why was it only that one when they suddenly decided, hey, let's plug in headphones? Because the phone had rung multiple times prior to that. So why did it not worry about all of these other incoming calls that came? Look at all these. So why suddenly at 5:45 they're like, oh my gosh, we better make sure that we plug in some headphones because we don't want this phone ringing anymore. Particularly when you see it in the light of the other stuff that I'm going to talk about why this here looks like a phone that is powering off. There are no more screen on and off events after that, basically, after this here, a few minutes later. Okay, oh, not minutes later, sorry, seconds later, 20 seconds later, the screen goes off, and that's the last screen off. See? No more screen offs until 2 days later when clearly that's been plugged back in by Bunner. So I suppose what I'm saying here is that there's kind of layers to it. And this is why it's so hard to actually explain, because there's so many layers. Like literally I could probably do a series of like 5 or 10 different videos on all the different parts, but then you kind of got to pull it all together as well. So it's just, my goodness, it's driving me nuts, guys. It really is. Okay. So I'm just checking the chat. Diana, you're with me still? You get to watch my process. Yeah, I know. I hope it's not too boring. This video, I guess I'm now used to doing my videos that feel a bit more exciting, and this one feels kind of boring. Yes, Diana, chat away, say whatever you like. So what does everybody think? I don't know. I know there's a few people in here and I don't even know if I was just babbling on and on and on just then because, yeah, I confused myself. I was like, oh, more questions. This is what happens literally. The amount of times I look at this spreadsheet and I open it up and then I'm like, oh, that's it. It must be that. And then I'm like, no, wait a minute. If you saw my ChatGPT, you would see there are like a gazillion questions, honestly. Look, even with the stuff that I've looked at today, yes, is it possible that headphones are plugged in? It sounds like it could be a possibility. Is it probable? I don't think so. Based on the contextual information here, this is a phone that is actually dying. Now, well, Diana, this was the easiest way apparently to digest it. I just realized I should put the comments on the stage. Let's actually stop sharing. There we go. Then we can just have the chat now. Well, that's the thing. This is ChatGPT doing the easy to digest version. Like, it's me kind of chanting and putting in all this data and inputting everything and being like, okay, now create an easy to digest document for me to follow, to explain it, but also for anyone else who wants to read it. And even then, every time I do it, I have another question. I mean, like, even when I was creating this, I was like, putting it in and then going, but wait a minute, we haven't added this, and wait a minute, we should add this. So, oh my goodness, yeah, this one's definitely dense. Yes, Diana, it does feel like maths, doesn't it? No, I know. I mean, initially I liked it for that reason because I was definitely a bit of a maths geek at school, and I actually loved stats at uni. I didn't really mind. I don't really mind this stuff. I kind of like looking at numbers and data, but like, yeah, this one though, it's just because there's just so many variables, and you've got these like couple of thousand lines of data, and the amount of times you go over it and you find something new each time. I suppose though, the reason why I'm sticking firm with it probably not being headphones is because of the other points that I probably should have done first, because they kind of layer on top of each other, which is the cold shock theory and the phone dying. And I've had a lot of pushback on those because people feel like it's magic that I'm talking about. But actually, there's a lot of documented evidence that an iPhone particularly, and particularly the 6S, I think I saw in some forums and things, and I'm not just relying upon what I saw in forums, but through all the research I've done, and even through speaking to people who are more scientifically knowledgeable than me, we know that lithium-ion batteries are affected by extreme cold. Now, what happens is, in this situation, everyone will say, well, it's not that cold outside there, or it had been cold like that all day. Why would it suddenly do that? Well, if the phone is on a cold surface, for example, the cold ground, then that is going to make the phone colder than if it's in cold air. So it's a difference between a hot plate and the oven, right? The oven takes time to heat up. And I mean, talking about cold, not hot, but the same kind of idea of like conduction versus convection, I suppose. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the cold shock theory, but getting a lot of pushback on the cold shock theory and the phone dying. And yet, to me, the data aligns with that. So if the phone is dying at 5:45, then this process of the audio output route log starting is essentially a fairly understandable part of the process of the phone dying. Then people say, well, why does the phone wake up again at 4:33? Well, actually, because the battery isn't completely dead. It's just electrically unstable. So what you actually see, if you look into this a little bit more in cold climates, is if you have your phone out in the cold and then you go back into the warm, the battery can actually tank and then come back up again. And that's because of the fact that the battery hasn't actually drained. It's the instability of the battery. So I'm going into cold shock theory here more, and you can see I get more excited when I talk about this because I feel like that's the more exciting thing, and I feel like I kind of understand it better, because that was probably one of the things that I've spent the most time on. But yeah, so, and then people will go, well, and I said this too, but then how does the phone come back on again? That sounds ridiculous. Well, at 4:33, you'll notice it doesn't fully come back on. We don't get a screen on. We don't get anything dramatic happening, just a whole lot of thinking from the network and a whole lot of startup processes. There's no user interaction, because it's basically what you would see when the phone just restarts on its own, because once the user interacts with the phone, you would get a screen on, like when you're kind of unlocking it and switching it on, if that makes sense. Again, I'll explain this more in detail. There's just too many parts to explain, Diana. That's why it's hard to ever do a TLDR. But yeah. Yes, I have, Diana. I have put the whole spreadsheet in. The problem with that is kind of like what I was saying before. Like, if you put information into ChatGPT without any context, it spits out like the most common answer, kind of like the Google searches, right? And then when you dig and kind of ask a few more questions, it will usually admit, oh, yeah, I didn't consider that. So, for example, if you put in what is audio output route change 1 on an iOS 10.2.1 phone, phone that's running that system, it will say, yes, it's probably headphones. And then when you dig deeper and you go, are you sure? Because I believe that what I've read is this. And then I've noticed I've tested this even on Google's AI that I'm not logged into. It doesn't know me. And it's like, oh, yeah, actually. And then it pulls up all these people who've spoken about the very fact that it was speaker, not headphones, back in pre iOS 11. So it's like, what? But you just told me that it was headphones and made me go, okay, I'm totally wrong again. It's literally, it gaslights me. But like, honestly, it does. It'll go back and forth and back and forth. I mean, yeah, that's the problem, I suppose. I mean, that's the issue with AI in general, because AI loves to make up new people on the trails and all sorts. Lucky I know enough about the Delphi case to be like, no, you're lying. Stop confabulating. But yeah, anyway, I mean, it's a hill I'm going to die on that phone is suffering from cold shock, and that is why the phone goes dead at 5:45, and that is why we see some system refresh events that occur later, but there's no further screen on and off from 5:45. And screen on and off generally is pretty reliable from my understanding for iPhones. The other signal that it's dying is those really weird screen on and offs around the 4 to 5:45 range, where they are longer. They're not seemingly related to incoming texts. In fact, the screen isn't lighting up for incoming texts or calls, but it's just lighting up randomly and then staying alight for a while. Like, it just doesn't behave normally, and that apparently is the hallmark of this cold shock or thermal shock theory. So, yeah, I definitely believe that the phone is either dropped on cold ground or has some exposure to cold on its surface. So, before I said maybe a splash of cold water, but I think it's more likely cold ground. Now, that was the evolution of my ideas. But yeah, that phone is not going anywhere inside after the Bridge Guy video. It stays out there, it's cold, and it doesn't survive very long. It survives a few hours and then it dies, and then it kind of flickers back and decides like to try again at 4:33. And what that coincides with, really interesting. This is interesting. This is all going to come up in the video about cold shock. But if you look at the sunrise on the 14th of February 2017, it's around, I believe, 6:30ish, 7ish or something like that. So basically, and I didn't know this, but the ground actually can warm slightly before the ambient temperature increases from the infrared rays prior to the sun fully rising. Something like that. It's amazing, the science here that I'm learning, and having to bounce off people who are more scientifically knowledgeable than I am around these sorts of things. Like, yeah, I mean, psychology is a science, but it's not this sort of science. So, yeah, interesting. I was never really interested in physics and chemistry. Well, I mean, I studied them. I did first year chemistry, a couple of subjects at uni, but I never really liked them. They weren't my forte, but they have definitely been things that come in handy in understanding some of the phone data, interestingly, and lithium ion batteries. Anyway, I'm going to do more research. This was a good test run because I don't think I'm ready to do the explainers videos succinctly. I'm going to have to keep working on the TLDR, Diana. I'm glad that I'm making it a bit more digestible, though. That's always my goal with this stuff. Because, as you know, I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to be the voice for exactly what happened. I know it's bold to go against the experts, and I don't do it to be disrespectful, but I just think if you find stuff that goes against the expert opinion and it makes sense contextually, then I don't see why you wouldn't mention it, you know? So I'm really not trying to be a know-it-all. I'm just trying to understand because I want to make sense of it. I want to see if it makes sense. I also don't think it's easy stuff to tamper with. So I don't think it's highly likely that people have been going in and, adding different weird entries to it, particularly not when you hear Bunner and Cecil and how they speak, because it doesn't seem like they have this really in-depth understanding of Apple iOS knowledge C stuff. So I'm not sure how they would then be doctoring. Again, I'm not accusing them of doing that because I don't believe they would be. I don't think that they would be. And I know when early on when I came into the looking at the sort of conspiracy angle of the case, I know that there were times where I jumped to conclusions about things like the Who's Your Harvest Store video, and then realized later, well, like actually it would take a lot to fully tamper with and doctor digital evidence. So I think, yes, you can suppress digital evidence, you can give a lower quality image, things like that. But I think like actually taking and adding lines to this data would be something that would probably be blatantly obvious then to the defense's experts, if that makes sense. Hey, Kimosabe, did I say that right? Is that how you say it? Kimosabe? I hope I said it correctly. Lovely to see you. I've seen a few of your comments. Thank you so much for engaging. Yeah, so I don't know if I hope that cleared some of it a little bit for everyone. I know Diana's saying it helped her, but yeah, I guess I'm leaving this with still some questions. However, I still stick by the fact that headphone insertion is not the most likely hypothesis here. And I'm sorry to say that, but iOS pre 11 one didn't necessarily equal headphones. One meant that the audio route had changed, and most likely it's to speaker rather than rather than headphones. Kimo says I was until 41 minutes just marking my return. Oh, okay. Thank you for coming back in. Thank you. Yeah, I feel really jumbled. I'm going to go back and think about this, and I'm going to come back and we're going to redo this with more resolve because I will have asked more questions. So leave it with me. Now I'm not going to sleep all night trying to figure out what questions I want to ask. Oh my goodness, way too many tabs open in my brain right now. Anyway, yeah, I guess that's all I was going to talk about today. I've kind of given a little bit more around the cold shock theory. I know I'm kind of redoing a lot of this stuff and now going into more detail, and that's just because I think it is getting a lot of pushback, and yet I think it's actually super relevant stuff. And so the reason that I push something and keep going and going about it is usually because I'm really passionate about it and I really think that it's relevant, rather than trying to be controversial. I keep feeling like I have to justify that, but yeah, hopefully it's not annoying continuing to hear the same stuff. There is more exciting, different stuff coming up too, though. It's not just going to be the phone data, which is why I really wanted to do these videos as pre-recorded videos and leave the lives for the more chatty, interesting stuff. But thanks for sticking with me tonight while I go through trying to figure this stuff out still, and have left with more questions. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there, guys, because, yeah, I just want to get straight into researching again, and I'm not going to bore you guys with all the researching on screen at the same time as me. But if anyone does do any of the research into any of that stuff we talked about today and has any answers, let me know in the comments. We can always update this document because it is a live document. So have a look at it. Let me know what you think. I'm not allowing everybody to update it, but only because who knows what's going to get updated into it, right? But if you think there's stuff that we need to update, let me know and I will continue to work on it. Anyway, have a lovely weekend, everybody. I'm going to go to sleep. It's hot here. don't know how I'm going to sleep tonight, but have a great night. Bye.